Thanks, Premier. One of the challenges with this is association doesn't mean guilt. Halphen has been associated with men, young men particularly, who have been radicalised. We need to strike a very careful balance about how we deal with those sorts of groups. People do have a democratic right to come together and explore their views. We do have concerns, particularly with Halphen and other areas, but there are risks and opportunities. We need to balance those carefully before we would ever look at closing that centre or any other centre down if we have the capacity to do that.
You're watching The World from Below, and that was a clip of Acting Police Commissioner Tim Cartwright talking about the balance between the right to associate and guilt by association. We're speaking with Jessie Smith and Ecehan Gulbayrak. Ecehan, tell me, Malcolm Turnbull has talked a bit about alternative approaches to foreign fighters, including in Canada where they don't have the right to strip citizenship, for example, and also places like Denmark where they engage in rehabilitation. What do you make of that phenomenon? What do you think we could be doing differently?
I think the current laws are quite draconian in terms of anti-terrorism and whatnot, and in a sense, they're actually quite detrimental to the community and also to a lot of youth, in a sense that it's fostering a lot of paranoia and mistrust in the community to the point where it's almost paralysing, where we're constantly having to, when we're even speaking to each other quite normally, it's very difficult because you're always paranoid that something might go wrong and then you're going to get raided and searched. So in this sense, you know, alternative methods to youth who are convicted, charged and whatnot, I think it's absolutely vital. Australia is quite, I don't know how to put it, but Australia is quite, the way that Australia is going about in terms of deterring more youth from going and joining and whatnot, or more youth from committing such offences, is absolutely wrong. Instead of embracing these youth and trying to get them involved more with the wider community, we're further alienating them, which is only to their detriment. So I think countries where they do have policies of, you know, rehabilitating them, of, you know, ensuring that their citizenship isn't stripped and whatnot, these sorts of things I think are absolutely important and vital. These youths most often than not are looking for ways to reconnect and get involved with the wider community because they feel like, you know, that they already feel isolated. So instead of giving more fuel, oh sorry, wait, I'll rephrase that. Instead of giving these youths more of a reason to not feel part of the community, I think the government needs to do a lot more to ensure that these youths, because they are very young again, that they are part and parcel.
It just comes back to how we conceptualise deterrence. Is deterrence through a jail cell, or is deterrence through proper investment in social cohesion, in inclusiveness, in bringing those who are on the periphery into the fold? My experience as a defence lawyer is that the latter is so much more effective, and we've seen it so much in our work with community organisations in the suburbs of Melbourne. I am convinced we can also do it with these offenders.
So let's talk a little bit more about that. What do we do with these kids when they're charged? Is there ways in which we can assist them to go through the process of being charged better? What are we doing enough in that respect?
It's interesting. I mean, it's very well developed in the criminal law that once someone is charged, that you wrap around them as many support structures as possible. There are very well resourced and very well developed bail and pre-trial support programs. The idea being that you've got to a point where a lot of your social supports have dissipated, that you're exhibiting problematic behaviour, that you've had a lot of areas of breakdown, maybe you've dropped out of school. Maybe you're having issues with your parents, you can't get a job. And so the criminal law has matured to a point where you can stage those interventions irrespective of whether you're pleading guilty or not guilty. Because ultimately if you're acquitted, well, you've just left the justice system a more resilient person. If you're convicted, then the community can be satisfied that you've started rehabilitation as early as possible. Interestingly, terrorism offences is the only category of offender that we don't have a comprehensive pre-trial support program. It's a very, very sorry state of affairs in my view. We do it with violent offenders, we do it with drug offenders. You know, the severity of the crime has never stopped us trying to deal with problematic behaviour. At our firm, we are trying to introduce and get support for a program that would provide religious instruction, mentoring and psychological support for those charged with terrorism offences. Because of their youth, I think this is a real opportunity to tackle some of those problems. And at the moment, the only coordinated response with terrorism offences comes after conviction, and that's just much too late.
Ecehan, in your experience, what do you make of the police's response to these kinds of issues? Because I imagine there's goodwill there, but there is also a lot of problems with policing. We've seen an issue of racial profiling in the western suburbs in Victoria, and a case settled on that particular issue. We've had a show on that whole issue. It's clearly a problem within Victoria Police, and it's one that I think will take a lot of effort to improve from what the stakeholders say. To what extent do you think they're doing enough, and could they be doing more?
There definitely is a problem with police and, police forces and whatnot. I think as a community there's a good, healthy level of mistrust. And that only goes back to some of the issues that have come from, the terror raids and those sorts of things. A lot of the time, the community, especially the Islamic Council of Victoria, is heavily liaising with Victoria Police so that they're more, culturally aware, religiously aware, and I guess more sensitive to certain issues. However, time and time again, they've failed the community. I think there was the terror raids last year. There was an issue in regards to some of the Muslim women. They weren't wearing their headscarves, police barge in, things like that. They're very simple things. And the community hears about this. The Muslim community living in Australia is quite small, so information gets spread very fast. I think Victoria Police and police in general, regardless of which state they're in, can do a lot more, and they can do a lot more with youth. Unfortunately, the youth don't like the police. They don't trust them. They don't liaise with them. And those who do liaise with police and who are in communication with them tend to be seen as, community sellouts and whatnot. So that, again, is quite problematic. So I don't know in terms of what the police can do to repair the damage, but it's quite bleak in that sense.
Unfortunately, that's all we have time for on this week's episode of The World from Below. I'd like to thank our guests Jessie Smith and Ecehan Gulbayrak. I would also like to thank all our crew and producers and our host RMI TV. You've been watching The World from Below. Thanks for joining us.